Hello, once again. I'm Doc Rotten, and this is Horror News Radio, the official Gruesome Magazine podcast. Back with me again this week are the scariest, goriest, bloodiest co-host on the net. And tonight we are talking about Lovecraft Country, Episode 6, Meet Me in Daegu, or Daegu, or Daegu. There's a couple different ways to pronounce it, and I don't think I did any of them right.
Confidence, Doc.
And I even looked it up. And I still messed it up. That's what I do. All right. Twice in a row. Okay. We're going to be talking about the latest episode, but first let me introduce the crew, starting off with the one and only Christopher G. War, award-winning filmmaker. Sir, how you doing?
Kuma hoes in this house. Kuma hoes in this house. I'm doing wonderful. I really enjoyed this episode. I can't wait to talk about it.
Really enjoyed this episode. It's going to be an interesting discussion. Find out if we all really enjoyed. All right, also joining us is podcasting rock star and international cosplay queen, Vanessa Thompson. Vanessa, how you doing?
We got some tentacles or something of the like in this episode.
Fuzzy foxtails.
That's right. Oh, this was a really fun episode. Departure from the rest. It's not my first impression. I'm going too fast.
It was a departure. All right, and we have a very special guest host, Christopher Slattery, the Slattman. How you doing, sir?
Good. I tried to come up with a good little intro, and all I got was a blast from the past.
Ooh.
A doom. All right. Slattman is coming to us all the way from Heroes and Droids, a fun podcast that you should check out. Yes?
Yeah.
See.
Yeah. Wow. You really sell it, sir. All right. What are we talking about tonight? We're talking about Lovecraft Country. This episode 6, Meet Me in Daegu. It aired September 20th. 2020, based on the novel by Matt Ruff, directed by Helen. The writer is Misha Green and Kevin Lau. And we get a new guest star, Jamie Chung, as Jia. We've been hearing her. Tick has been calling her every once in a while. And this episode is a bit of a flashback as we find her in Korea during the Korean War and encounters Tick, as you see in the picture. In the throes of the Korean War, nursing student Jia crosses paths with a wounded Atticus, who has no recollection of their violent first encounter, and it indeed violent. But hidden between those lines is, I guess, a little bit of J-horror, a little Korean horror, a little Asian horror with, what was the character's name again there, Christopher G. Moore?
You talking about the creature? Kumo?
Yes, Kumo. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to give our first impressions, and then we're going to talk about the show a little bit, and then we're going to end up with our final thoughts, our score, and favorite scene. You're going to want to stick around for that. So let's dive into things. Let's let our guest go first. Christopher Slattery. Slatman, what's your first impression?
It's real good.
Oh!
I know, shocking, right? We're 6 on this show so far. It's a really good, like, change of pace, I guess, is a good way to put it. And I don't know if it was the fact that 90% of this episode was in subtitles, so I actually had to pay like more attention than I normally do. But I was so sucked into this episode. I loved how they introduced the new characters. I loved the relationship that we see between oh gosh, I don't remember her name. Jiha and her mom, and how all of that unfolds. I loved the horror aspects of it, and just seeing more of Atticus, and it's just, and man, so much more makes sense now.
So much more makes sense now. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. Let's find out what the rest of the crew think. Vanessa, you're up next.
I'm with the Slattman. I loved it. I really enjoyed G. She's a wonderful character, and I really like how they kind of give her a duality of her own, because we're learning about this monster, but also about the person that she is. I loved the backdrop. I loved seeing a different part of the world during the same time. All these things that are going on in America, these horrible things towards people of color. And then you go over to Korea and see just how different things are when you step out of your own world, how life was for them before the war, after or during the war, you know, just for a young woman who's obsessed with Judy Garland. You know, I really, really loved that opening where she, I don't want to go too, maybe not too spoilery, but where she's in the theater by herself is such a beautiful moment. And yeah, the horror aspect is fun in this one.
Yeah, it's bloody.
Yeah, bloody.
It's HBO.
Gory.
Yeah. Yes. All right, Christopher G. Moore, you're up next. Give us your first impression.
This is the best version of MASH I've ever seen.
Hey!
No, that actually this is better than any episode of MASH in my opinion. It's more realistic, at least in some parts. No, I really, 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 really love this episode, and I've really loved a lot of the episodes in the series so far. And I think that's what I love about this show is every episode takes place in almost like in a different genre, sometimes in a different location, sometimes in following different characters. And you really get invested in it. I think, you know, them going sort of, you know, full blast into this sort of Korean horror story. That's what they should call it, Korean horror story. And really, I mean, even with the, you know, I think on a lesser channel, they probably would have had him speaking in English. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, as someone that's, I think sometimes it takes away from the storytelling if it's supposed to be in that specific time period. And even though a few of them do speak English, it should be done, you know, in the language they speak, because then you feel the power of, you know, of what they're talking about, even if you're having to read the subtitles. And there's some really powerful moments. I think that the main actress in this is amazing. The costuming, the dresses that she wears, the fabrics. This episode should win an Emmy just for its costuming, even production design, you know, everything. And then sort of tying in an actual Korean folktale. There's actually different Asian versions of like the Kumaho, and other variations involving like the fox and its seven tails or whatever, and how they incorporate that, which is almost like the Korean version of like the succubus to some degree that we see in some of our normal American supernatural horror tales. But then you also have like, there's like that Guillermo del Toro approach to creatures, to creatures that some people would look as being evil. But there's also that side, that compassionate side, or that side that wants to be human, and I think you have this person who's, you know, watching these Judy Garland films and wanting to be like that and learning to be like, this is how women are supposed to be, you know? And for me as even though I'm in a totally different location in the world and I'm as white as can be, I could sort of relate to this young girl who's like, you know, I've learned everything I know from watching movies. This is probably why I'm so socially awkward, but I could relate to that. You know, it doesn't shy away from the sex and the horror aspects of it. I never, you know, I always thought like being attacked by tentacles, you know, or tentacle porn as they usually call it, was pretty bad. But it having free tails, that one scene is one of the most gruesome scenes. I was like cringing because there's like stuff coming out of people's eyes and going into people's butts and all kinds of weird stuff. And I'm like, what the hell's happening here? And then, you know, and there's blood everywhere. But yeah, I really enjoyed this because, again, I think most of your best ways to tell horror is basing it into a lot of the horrors of our world. And we get to see that in the Korean War. A lot of the Korean War was not like MASH. There's a lot of racist people. There's a lot of mean stuff they did. You know, they were more about themselves a lot of times than they were the country they were fighting in. They're supposed to be helping to free these people from whatever, but they ended up using them. And doing horrible things to them and torturing them. And you have that that scene that sort of shows that, and shows that Atticus is not, as much as he's sort of like the hero somewhat in the series, he's got a lot of demons. And you see like he's done some horrible things during this war. And you can see like when he talks about like, I've done horrible things. Yes, he is. And he's just, and he's no different a monster than the main character. So yeah, I really love this. This is, I can't say enough good things about it. I really enjoyed this episode from beginning to end.
All right, so I get to be the guy.
You're the guy.
I'm the dissent here. This episode didn't register with me in the same way it's registered with the three of you, mainly because I miss our characters. We get Tick, and outside of a brief flash of some characters, during one scene, we really don't get the others. And I just felt that whole through the entire episode. That being said, I still enjoyed the show. It still was entertaining. There was a lot going on in this new character who we've been hinted at on the phone over the past couple episodes. I think he calls her every single episode, at least once, right? And we know that he went to war, and we know he's alluded to these terrible things. So we get all that. I just don't know if I was really in for it. It's really, this one's really tough for me. I agree with what Christopher said. The costuming is wonderful. The scenery is wonderful. The location, really, there's some interesting things that they have to say. We'll get into all that when we start, diving into details. But at the same time, for me, I just missed all the other characters, and that was, I just felt, I spent the whole time wondering where they were and missing them. So I'm sorry.
Hey, you're allowed to have your opinion. I really enjoyed kind of like the palate cleanser feeling that it had. And going back to, I think we needed that to see Tick like that. He's not just the pretty, soft, everybody's hero. He's really caused some pain, which not exemplifies, but like makes his pain even greater, right? And even a monster could realize that you do things out of stress and out of trauma that aren't characteristic of yourself. But I just loved, I really loved seeing this from through a Korean's eyes, through that part of the world, getting back to, if nothing else, like bringing in a monster, right? A real monster into this all these Lovecraftian themes. You get this elder being, right? Someone who can be summoned, who can be called, who you think you can use one way, but is really calling the shots and manipulating things. And I thought that was really needed. And, I liked, after the last few episodes that we've had, they've been like pow, 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 right?
Right.
The whole time. It's kind of nice to slow down, take a breath, see some very visually beautiful things. That room that she's in, where she performs these rituals, let's say, you can definitely see where Quentin Tarantino gets his kind of inspiration from, because that particular room is so, what you're stepping into in that moment. It's almost like stepping into another world that is so iconic of Asian culture, stepping into that room. That's what really stood out to me, and it allowed me to kind of put our other characters aside for a moment. I mean, and I really was not prepared to see Tick the way that he is shown in this. And I did not think that I would be able to see him any other way after that. Even though I've known him this whole time one way, after seeing him behave the way that he did in South Korea, I didn't think I'd be able to get past that.
Yeah. We were told in a couple episodes, that he didn't want to be like his father, but when he got to Korea, the war made him more like his father than his father ever could have. And we get to see that here
Well, and that's, I mean, those themes of dealing with your parents and stuff, and the hell that they put you through, to where they sort of turned you into something that's even worse than what they could have done for you. I mean, you have the similar thing with the mom and the daughter, the main female character in this.
Mhm.
You know, her mom. Try not to get too spoiler, but her mom, after something happens to her, her mom puts her through this thing to where she's basically having to do something even worse to
Mhm.
some degree, murdering people, and basically turned her daughter into a prostitute of sorts.
Yeah, because she has to just so little minor spoilers. She has to consume 100 souls, and we watch her consume the 99th soul. So
Mhm.
one more
Yeah,
soul to
yeah.
go.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, I think one of the most powerful scenes there is where, she plays into that, like, that she's never going to be that daughter that her mom wants her to be.
That was, and the revelation of
Ugh.
I don't have those memories. The memories I have are of, insert spoiler here.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like
But
that-
saying to
that-
her, "You
Ugh.
took those from me."
Like that part really hits you.
Mhm.
It's powerful, because you for one moment you see her kind of switch
Mhm.
to show that, and you realize, oh crap, and I think that's when the mom realized, oh, I really put you through a lot. So yeah, and I think this episode, regardless it's a departure from a lot of these other characters we have, I think it's something we needed, because we've known about this sort of backstory involving him, and the thing and like, why did he leave her?
Mhm.
And I can understand, because if that happened to me, I mean, like, I'm gonna get the F out of here. But you get to sort of see that a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it than just him running off, leaving some woman, in Korea. And but also you get to see that, like, that he's got a lot of, like, issues on both sides with things. He's done all these horrible things, but at the same time, he can still pitch a fit because he can't read his book with his glasses, and
Yeah.
turns into a little
That was a
boy
good moment,
again.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you get to see this, like, really, you don't see that too many movies where, like, the strong man is breaking down and stuff. And so you get to see that, like, he's, like a lot of these people that go off to war, young people that have to experience this and are forced to do this. They come back a different person, and they're just kind of messed up in the head, and you can see why.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can we just do a quick shout out to what is it, James? Hang on a minute. I'll get his name here. Oh, I've lost it. James Kyson Lee, who plays one of the victims. I remember him as Ando from Heroes. He was Hero, Hiro, best friend, right, Slattman?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Oh, and I want to give out a shout out, Courtney Chin, who was one of the nurse actresses in this very pivotal moment in the show. She's an actress out of Atlanta who got to be in that, and it's kind of cool seeing someone that I follow on social media and stuff who pops up in this episode and is a really important part of it.
Yeah. So, what did you do, Slapman? What was it going through your mind when our character finds out what 9 tails are?
Wait,
the Japanese traveler.
Woohoo.
Yeah, woohoo.
Oh man, that scene just kind of that scene probably was one of the highlights visually from in this episode, like specifically where they show it through the window and it's just the shadows.
Oh, that was a good shot.
Yeah.
Yes.
The thing that actually kind of got me, and this, I kind of feel bad about this, but kind of had me laughing a little bit, was the montage of him, his life, and he's like on top of the mountain. He's like,
Yeah.
I was just like, what is going on? And then it clicked. I was like, oh wait, no, that I know exactly. Yeah, that. So from the beginning of the episode, you can kind of tell that something is off like with her. Like
Mhm.
maybe you don't know if it's like if it's supposed to be like a mental thing or if it's supposed to be a like a physical thing or if it's like a fish out of water thing, but then it turns into something completely different, and then everything really snowballs from there with the story. And it's just that's the best way to introduce us to the character.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's. I will say that it's going to be interesting to see where this character ties back in, or if she does. I would imagine they're not going to spend all this time with her, not to have her appear again in some fashion. Either he returns to Atticus, goes back to South Korea, or she comes to the States, or there's some kind of travel involved. Maybe go through one of those weird gates that we discovered a couple episodes back,
or a magical tunnel.
Yeah, the magical tunnels
that can magically take you from Boston to Chicago.
Yes,
in the span of 30 minutes, or no, less than 30 minutes. It was they had 40 minutes until they had to be back.
Walk down a hallway and you're states away. So there could be something like that, but I feel like it ends on a note that makes me feel like she knows when to arrive. And
well, I and I in my head I have a certain prediction how she could be used, and that maybe it's just in my storytelling mindset how I think that she could be used towards the end of this season.
She's got one more soul to consume, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's soul gonna be?
And there's a certain person that can become a man. Not to say, I don't know. I guess she only kills men, I guess, but yeah, I for some reason I think that would be a good way to tie that in. But I don't know. I loved. I mean, the thing is, I really loved a lot of the visual things they did. I mean, there's a really cool thing where she runs out in the rain with her bloody hands, and she's like, it's a really visual thing, almost showing like her between two worlds type thing. And also just, and the whole Judy Garland thing, which is I think is kind of interesting, where the ending of it is almost like Wizard of Oz-ish. If you think about it, it's very magical in how it ends.
Okay.
Because you have the what they call a mudang, which is a Korean shaman. They go to is almost like
the wizard
or Wizard of Oz, but a real Wizard of Oz, not somebody stuck behind a curtain who's just a guy, with the gadgets that aren't magical. So
yep. And there was was that a Pokemon down the pathway? I don't know. I think it was just a fox, but what do you read?
Well, there is a I mean, fox, I mean, again, with foxes, what was you said, Chris, about is there a Pokemon that's like Ninetales?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the stories or the myths or like the legends or whatever it is over in Asian cultures, I don't know the terminology off the top of my head, but the stories that that our character is based off of, I believe are the same stories that the Pokemon Ninetales is supposed to be based off of. So
well, I know the Japanese myth is Kitsune, which is the spirit. The spirit is more of a guiding religious being in Japanese culture, and then the Chinese fox, which is the Hulijing, are more similar to, or a little bit similar to the Lovecraft country spirit, but it's where it shapeshifts into women, feeding on men for survival. But it's more portrayed as a good natured companion. And then the Kumiho is just full on evil, where it usually hangs out in graveyards and needs a human skull to transform into one, and sucks the victim's blood like vampires and conjures up illusions and that kind of thing. It doesn't really have the clairvoyance that this creature has in the show, but I do love how they spin stuff that's actually part of their culture. And then you can go online. I was actually went a deep dive in YouTube videos on like the artwork and stuff about, because when I was watching, I wrote down the terms, because when they were subtitles, I was like, ooh, I'm gonna look this up. And then later on, she pulls that little picture book, and I was like, But I was looking up these words and stuff because I was like, oh, because to me it's like if I can learn something about like other kind of mystical creatures, which I think actually I came across at Kumaho when I was making my film Knobgoblins because I was studying like Asian fairy tales and myths about creatures that go after men. So, but yeah, I know I love how they spin that, and they also spin historical elements in there as well. You know, even that little cartoon they showed, which was like a communist propaganda type film in the theater, was an actual cartoon made by Warner Brothers back in the day. So I love how they sort of spin like actual historical stuff into it as well.
Yeah, that's probably some of the better moments as well, or some of those you get that, you know, like when they arrive, when the troops arrive, and we are here to help you. Don't be afraid, and they're throwing all the propaganda at them and
pamphlets. Yeah,
it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that looks
And
great.
then you hear
not how we saw it. Not how we saw it on the news in America.
Yeah. You hear like the MASH theme while they're throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, there you go. That's our discussion. What we're going to do now is we're going to wrap this up. We're going to give our final thoughts, our score, and our favorite scene. The favorite scene, you're going to want to stick around for that, but before we do, if you are still here and listening, thank you for sticking around. Please hit the subscribe button down below, hit the like button or the dislike button, hit the bell so you can be reminded, and leave us some comments. We also have a Patreon, and I want to just bang this up real quick and thank the patrons for helping support Gruesome Magazine, H&R, Decade to Horror, and Heroes and Droids, all our efforts that we put out there, which are now mostly on YouTube, and you can find us there as well, and our podcast, and of course over at gruesomemagazine.com. Thank you guys and dolls. Thank you. All right, let's do this. Let's dive in. Slattman, you are up first, sir. Give us your final thoughts, your score, favorite scene.
This episode was a great breath of fresh air. And unlike Doc, I appreciated the break from the rest of our characters because it allowed us to, one, fill in a giant mystery and a giant gap that has been like dangling in front of us since the very first episode of the series. And it allowed us to explore a little bit more of Atticus, and it kind of makes some of the actions that he's taken make a lot more sense. And some of the things that he said. Outside of that, the episode is great. It's got a great story. It's got characters that really make you care. Without going too spoilery, it's got a character that just makes your heart break when something happens. There's and we only spend like 30 minutes, maybe like 45 minutes with a lot of these characters because of everything that's going on. So the writing is excellent. And then the cinematography and the use of color in this episode, I think, is outstanding. I can't think of many great examples right off the top of my head, but one of the ones that comes to my mind is at the very end when they're up in the mountains talking to the shaman. Just like the use of color in that scene is outstanding, and then the contrast of all of the darks with all the blood, and just it's so well done. I really liked it. I thought it was great, and without getting too spoilery, I cannot wait to see what we saw at the very end of that episode, like how all that unfolds, because I think we were just given a huge amount of information in the span of like 60 seconds.
Good for that.
For my score, I'm going to give it a 5.
Woo!
And my favorite scene, I think, is actually probably the scene where our main character confronts her mother and tells her, you know, these memories aren't mine, you know, without giving too many spoilers. please go watch it. But
Mhm.
that scene is so well acted. That scene is shot so well. Between it is just two characters talking, but it's shot so well, and at least for me, it's so incredibly tense, like seeing these two fight back and forth just with words, and it's heartbreaking, but yet it's such a great scene. I think it really develops so much character, and it's so well done.
It really, really is. Yeah, you're absolutely right. All right, Vanessa, you're up next. Final thought, score, favorite scene?
I love this one. Like Slattman said, it covers so many different things we needed to be filled in on that are just gonna blow up. I know it. I like he was saying, the ending of this episode and everything that we have the potential to see now. It just makes me even more excited. I really, really loved the tone of this episode. I loved the way that it looked. I love the way that it's showcasing Western influence on an Eastern culture, right? And you see it in both ways. You see it from the army, who's supposed to be the savior, right? That's what we always thought. You see it from Hollywood, which is the perfection, right? The perfection of Western culture is Hollywood and Judy Garland. And then you see the reality of Western culture and what it does to Eastern culture and to the people there, and how little regard it has for them. You see this, it's just so beautiful how you see those topics earlier on in the series, and it still translates to the other side of the world. Definitely a 5 for favorite scene. Absolutely a 5 for this one. They've all just been such amazing episodes to me. Now, as far as favorite scene goes, that's hard for me to choose, because honestly, I think my favorite thing about the episode is our monster. You know, the point of view of the monster and the way they develop it as an actual character. That to me carried so much weight with it, and was so, so sad at times, and so full of joy and surprise at times. And it's like seeing someone seeing our culture and trying to understand and then implement that, trying to understand emotion. What is emotion? Do I feel emotion? Do I know emotion? Do I know what I'm feeling? All those are such strong topics to discuss. And, I think I have to pick that as my favorite overall theme, and maybe not a favorite scene. Can I cop out this time?
You can do that. Yeah, sure.
Because I really loved our monster. I have a very strong feelings for that character.
No, that works. That works. All right, Christopher G. Moore, you're up next. Final thoughts, score, favorite scene?
I've loved every episode, which seems to take its own little interesting departure, either going into other cultural, historical type stuff, or going into different genres. And with this sort of going across the other part of the world to tell this story, to fill in the blanks with, who this mystery character that the Atticus keeps calling. I think it's a fresh and amazing departure that really checked off all the boxes for me. I think her name is Jamie Chung, who played the main actress in this. She is amazing, and I want to see her in more stuff, because she has to show like so many different facets, from being this sort of like shy type person to being this passionate person, to being this monstrous person, to being this emotionally tortured person. And she does that throughout the episode, and it's amazing to watch. There's a really tense conversation she has with Atticus. I think there's a couple of lines from this episode that are some of my favorite lines in the whole series. Because she says, "We've both done monstrous things, but that does not make us monsters," which feels like a Guillermo del Toro quote. And that's what I love about it, because you have both of these characters from different parts of the world. They've done these horrible things, but that doesn't necessarily frame them as being fully evil, fully monstrous. There's also about the sins of the father or the mother as well, because there's another quote where they said, we have to stop letting our fears shape us. Stop letting their fears shape us. So the fears of the mom or fears of the father, which always sort of trickle down into the sons and daughters, Yeah, and again, they don't shy away from the sexual aspect of it. There's some, there's a really sexy scene in front of the movie theater screen, which is like, as a movie lover, I love that. And then there's that scene where you have all kinds of tails coming out every orifice, which I didn't like that, but I did like it because it was so horrifying just seeing these furry tails come out of eye sockets and stuff. It's like, holy shit, what the hell is going on here? So yeah, you can have both of the fantasy elements, but then you have these really strong confrontations, these strong scenes that go into areas that we can, even though this takes place in a different country, some of us maybe have never been to or might not know, we can relate to some of the issues they're dealing with, even though it's culturally it's a different thing. And then historically, just going there too, I think everything from production design to costuming to visually to acting, it's firing on all cylinders. This episode puts my love in Lovecraft country.
Oh wow! Okay.
Just how it sort of like it tells these stories that doesn't shy away from the horrors of a history or the horrors of things that people do throughout history, but also frames it within the aspect of like, but they're also human. They also have souls to some degree. They also have things that they're passionate about and love. I mean, normally as a horror lover, I would pick let me 5 out of 5. Let me just say that first. Okay. If it's not obvious already. Normally as a horror lover, I would pick probably the big, tentacle tail scene, but I'm going to go with a more simpler scene. And maybe it's because I'm a cinematic romantic at heart, but that kind of broke my heart is when they're doing almost like this speed dating type thing.
Oh yeah.
And she's really hoping to connect, and all she could connect with is her love of Judy Garland films. And she expresses that. And you have that one moment where she thinks he's made that connection, and the guy's, I just want to punch him in his face. And I mean, even that opening scene where you see her looking at the movies and you see the reflection of the movies on her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it hits me hard because I'm a movies, or what I know movies are, maybe that's why it makes me kind of social awkward, because that's how I can relate to people, and hopefully I can find people that relate to me in that respect. So that scene really hit me hard. Because I always feel like that's always held against me, my love of movies and stuff like that. So
fucking nerd.
Why am I getting emotional about that? But anyway, I'm a fucking nerd.
Fucking nerd.
But anyway, that was, if I want to pick a scene, even though it's, although I probably would have picked Slattery scene previously, because that's a very powerful scene. But I'll say that scene it broke my heart in a million pieces.
Oh, that's nice. All right. You guys have talked me into liking this episode a lot more for a lot of reasons, but at its core though, it pulled me out of the series because I missed all the other characters, and that's hard to kind of deny for myself. But everything you guys are saying is absolutely right. They really build this character G up quite a bit, and you really like her, even though she is, air quotes, a monster, right? She's this mythological creature inhabiting this girl's body, and but there's a lot of depth to it, a lot of and her connection to Tick really kind of registers too. So there's a lot going for this episode, a lot going for the aesthetics of it, the character involvement, the the young lady and her mom and how they interact is really strong. It starts out kind of innocent with her wanting to find a husband or find a man, right? We think we think we're at first we think we're trying to find, bring home a husband and get respect again, right? But we learned that it's not. There's something else going on. And it takes a little while to get there, and that didn't bother me. Just to be clear, I actually liked the build up. I mean, some people might think it was a little slow, but it actually was quite engaging. So as a story, I really loved it. As a part of the series, it didn't quite kick me as the previous ones have. So I'm going to give it a 4, but it's a very strong 4. Okay.
So strong it might be a 4.25.
No, it's just gonna be a 4 because it was gonna be lower. But you guys really talked me into it because there is so much going on here, and there's a lot of really cool scenes you can choose as favorites, and that's part of when I was trying to go through that in my head. That's part of it too. That, man, there's really is a lot in here. I was surprised, Vanessa, you didn't pick the opening dance scene when she's in the theater by herself.
Oh, I know. I love that. Okay, so steal your shine for a moment. If I have to pick a favorite scene, I think it's the moment after Tick runs out and her mother walks in and she's just crying and her mother mothers her kind of for the first time in this episode.
Yes.
And that was a scene that broke my heart, but also showed kind of like some bonds can't be broken.
One scene that I really liked. Actually, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to actually choose
cheat
2
like
more.
me.
I'm going to cheat and choose 2 more because I kind of gave one out, right? So there's a couple. They're both conversations. One of them was the conversation when. Is the whole, we're both monsters, or when I met you, I was actually going to kill you, but I came to like you and perhaps even love you. So there was really emotional. That scene where they're standing there together is just like there's so much going on. There's so much chemistry and connection going on. But what I found probably the most interesting outside of that relationship is earlier on, when Tick's at the hospital recuperating, he's outside with a friend of his and an Asian friend that's in the army from the States, even though he's Korean, right? And she's asking him about going back home. Don't you want to go back home? And he explains to her that he's treated far differently at home than he is here. And she wonders why he wants to go back, right? And then her friend, like, why did you do it? His friend, rather. And you would think he'd be better off, right? And he's not. He's basically he's called names in both places. He's in a no-win situation, right? He has in the States, he's called one slang, and in South Korea, he's called another because he's no longer truly South Korean or Korean at this moment. So it's I found that really interesting culturally, right? And that's really the show's about that, right? The show's about how we treat other people, and there's a lot of that here. So anyway, I there's a lot to like about this. I think I stand corrected.
Although I will say, seeing this, the Kumaho puts a whole new perspective on that opening scene in the first episode, where he sees her as like almost like an alien, and then we see like a tentacle monster. So,
right, she's in that first episode, right? She's the one that comes down.
She's in the red paint, the alien that comes down, and then we see them fighting off a tentacle monster.
Yeah.
So
it kind of gives me a new perspective on you got to catch them all. So I'm just.
But
I like Slattman shakes his head like, no, sir. All right, there you go. That's our review of Lovecraft Country this week. I hope you stuck around to check it out. If you did, thank you so much. Slattman, thank you for joining us for this. Vanessa, Christopher, thank you for hanging out. This was a great discussion. Thank you.
It's always a blast.
I know.
Anytime we can change your mind, Doc.
Mwah.
You sure it's not a 4.25?
He's not.
Maybe.
4.9 tail.
Let's say goodnight.
Good night.